Okay, that should be good for now. We'll get started, everyone. My name is John Grant. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. Would like to introduce Joe Lacalandra, who's a client success manager over here at Goliath. The two of us will be your hosts for today's webinar, which is, of course, focused on Citrix IT pros, and in particular, benchmarking and user experience against industry standards, excuse me. And we'll get right into it today. Of course, the idea and the concept of benchmarking or baselining to understand how the environment's performing or how user experience is not a new concept, but it's one that a lot of folks have had a lot of interest in recent months, and so we're excited to get into the subject matter today. Real quickly, a few housekeeping items. Please, as we go through the webinar, please feel free to submit questions in the chat box in the lower right-hand corner. If we're able to, we'll address them during the course of the session, but we will definitely address them towards the end. We always get a number of very good questions, and we really find that they make the webinar because we really want to hear from you all and focus on topics and items of interest. So please submit your questions, and we'll definitely get to them. There will be a recording after today's session, so if you get called away, or if you would like to access the recording to share it internally afterwards, you'll get an automated email with the link to the recording, so you'll have access to that. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's get right into it. And real quickly, the agenda for today is, of course, obviously the topic. We're focused on benchmarking and user experience against industry standards. The way we're going to go through is we're going to start off by talking about what the issue is around this and give you an example around some of the challenges that some of our clients had experienced around baselining and user experience as it relates to Citrix. We'll talk about why the challenges have been faced by this particular customer, an investment banking and financial services company, and explain and talk a little bit about how other customers have had some challenges around this. Finally, we'll talk about how exactly customers in this particular customer address this challenge around benchmarking. And then finally, I want to turn it over to Joe Lacalandra, who is going to talk in a little bit more detail about how in particular this customer addressed it, and go into a little bit more detail into that use case and how they were able to be successful. Okay, so let's get right into it. That's the agenda and the flow for today's session. First off, what is the challenge around benchmarking or baselining? Now, obviously, these concepts and these are things that IT departments do all the time in a lot of different areas to understand what the performance is, what normal should look like for the environment. And in particular, we're going to be focusing on end user experience, especially for Citrix environments and for Citrix users. And the challenge, and using this particular customer as an example, the challenge that they faced when they came to us was that they were really having a hard time doing this. In particular, they didn't have objective metrics, and they didn't have an objective way to look at what the actual end user experience was. As a result, they couldn't baseline it or understand what it normally should be. And they furthermore weren't able to prove to management really anything in terms of whether the user experience was good or bad, or what fixes that they have done or should do based on that information. Nowhere to stand on and no way to prove that they were going in the right direction. And the reason for this is that they just could not get access to the data. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Why is this the case? What they told us was that, if you go to the next slide, Joe, what they told us was that they just didn't have the tools that would give them the information they needed. And in particular, while they did have tools, when they would meet as an organization to understand what the actual user experience was, the different teams in the organization, the Citrix team, network team, server team, came with their tools to try to understand what normal looked like. The Citrix team, unfortunately, just didn't have enough historical information. What's more is they didn't have the right information due to some of the limitations around how director functions. They just didn't have enough historical data or the right information to really understand objectively what that was. So they were left to look at other technologies. The network team had their network technologies, great at understanding bandwidth, but not user specific, not built for Citrix. And so not really giving a definitive answer, giving some clue, but they're component focused, not focused on user experience. The same thing goes for the server team and the server tools. Server monitoring, while great and important, is looking at infrastructure components. And so when they're trying to understand what the actual user experience was, they were out of luck. And they were forced to make assumptions based on what the users were telling them, subjective feedback, and they were unable to have hard data, objective data to stand on to either understand what the actual user experience was objectively or show that they were doing a good job, show what it was like after changes took place. And the slide that Joe just pulled up summarizes this pretty well, because the simple fact is that the tools and technologies used to go through this kind of exercise are either, like we just talked about, focused on individual components, not focused on user experience. And if they did have some data, just was not the right information, nor was it retained in a way that allowed you to actually track and trend this, which is the whole focus and purpose of the baselining and benchmarking exercise. And so the solution for this particular challenge, this gap, it is technology that is purpose-built and brings embedded intelligence and automation to bear for Citrix environments. In particular, one that would collect all the user experience details, the right details, and keep it historically. So you could actually get a real objective look at what the user experience actually is, not just whether some of your users woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day. You then have the ability to go even further and correlate that with the supporting infrastructure component. So bringing all of that together so you see both user experience and what's driving it from an infrastructure standpoint. And finally, the technology that helps you interpret that information and will actually walk away with conclusions you can do something with. And so as it relates to this particular customer, what they really found meaningful, and Joe will go into in a second, is the specific details. And you see some of the details listed on the screen there that Joe's going to talk about, that tell them exactly what the user experience is, and in detail that allows them to actually do something with that and put in place the right fixes. Now, Joe, as it relates to this particular customer, they went through this exact same exercise, right? And so can you talk a little bit about what it is they did, how they got to that point, and then what they were able to do with that information from a baselining and benchmarking standpoint?
Absolutely, and thank you, John, for illustrating the point so well. And I think it's a use case not only for this specific customer, but those of you who are on today's webinar, you probably are facing in real time, because unfortunately for IT, the biggest problem that you all face is really a lack of visibility, a lack of data, and it's sort of makes it a guessing game when trying to understand whether performance is good or whether performance is bad. So that was the case with this specific financial planning and investment customer. They were having real challenges understanding what user experience was like for their organization. They had no way to be able to get visibility into whether performance was good or whether it was bad. So they came to us. We were able to deploy our technology in less than 90 minutes. The great part is the financial planning organization did not have to purchase the software. They were able to have a low-cost short-term subscription, and even this service is even offered at this benchmark is even offered as a service. It's totally turnkey. Our team deploys the technology, begins to correlate and interpret the data right away for you. So we're talking about this specific customer and the solution. This is exactly what we were able to provide them. We were able to give them objective evidence and an objective look into their actual user experience to be able to help pinpoint root cause for troubleshooting and increase collaborations between teams, so they're not having to hunt down different team members to find metrics for a specific user. Everything is in a single pane of glass, and we're able to bring all that data into really tightly knit report between data and analytics to really allow them to baseline and benchmark user experience and to be able to report to management, most important, what the overall health of the environment is. So we're going to obviously spend a lot of time talking about and showing you the reports that we have and data and analytics within the technology. Before we do that, I think it's really important, though, to actually dive into the console here to give everyone some perspective and understanding of how we're collecting this data and exactly what it's going to look like to the IT admin. So I think the best way to illustrate that is to actually look at a specific user within the console, talk a little bit about what data we're collecting around user experience, and then we'll actually go through and show you some of those important data and analytics and reports that's really help them baseline their user experience. So with our technology, we're collecting, Citrix information about the user experience in real time and historical, which is obviously important for being and helpful for baselining and benchmarking user experience. We're able to give you data around round trip time, which you may be familiar with, the performance of the network for that user's experience, and most uniquely, the connection of the specific user, a metric that's not available and is a big blind spot for anyone who's trying to support Citrix, and anyone who calls to IT and says that their session is slow. You normally don't have visibility into their connection. So we're bringing all these great metrics, obviously, around user experience, the logon process, everything into a single pane of glass, which again is helpful for baselining and benchmarking user experience. And what it really we're able to do, and as a result, we're able to bring all this into what we call a user experience scorecard. And I'll explain why this was meaningful for this specific customer. So we talked about them not having an objective look into user experience, not being able to show management how good or poor user experience is, and not being able to see and explain to a user what could be troubling them. So there's really three main use cases with this report as you look at it. Number one, we're giving you an objective look at user experience and assigning a user experience score, not only per user, but overall for your for all of your Citrix users. So in this example here, you're able to see on the right side all the different users, their user experience score, and then the totality of that on the left side. Number two, we're looking at actual users and being able to track that information historically. We're able to give you the ability to look at user performance for 7 days, for 14 days, for 30 days, 60 days, which is not possible without the historical data. And it's something, frankly, you can't get out of the Citrix free tools like Director and Analytics that are just going to give you a real-time view of what user experience is. With Goliath, this customer was able to look historically at each of their users' experience. And number three, it really helps them tell the full story. When they're talking to management, they're talking to an end user, this report is extremely helpful because they're able to take a look here and we're able to see exactly what each individual user's score was and see which parts these users or the IT team is struggling with. So we can see users that have high ICA latency, have high network latency, and connection speed as well too. So IT literally in one view here can tell the entire story about user experience and be able to have that objective data, which you frankly just cannot get with the free tools. As John mentioned before, this customer was not able to get an objective look with just the information in Director as well as Analytics. Here, we're bringing all those great user experience metrics that we showed you in the technology, like round trip time, like ICA latency, network latency, and connection speed, into one view. You can see individual users and you can see everything as a whole. So again, this really allowed them to be able to baseline and benchmark objectively and look at their performance of for their end users. So obviously, with end user experience, being able to see this information is, a big piece of the puzzle. Another part that this team was and this specific customer was struggling with were their logon times. And I'm sure anyone who's supporting Citrix on this call has gotten a complaint before saying, my logon takes too long. What could, and you're trying to wonder what could be causing that. And with using the Citrix free tools, you're not getting a real granular look at that information. So with Goliath, we're able to track this information historically and organically, and we're able to collect it with, most importantly, out of the box without any scripting at all. So you don't have to click on a specific user and run a script to be able to see what group policies that user was accessing, or authentication or logon scripts. All that information is readily available to you within the technology, and we're able to pull it into this. This is just one of our logon reports to give this customer a look at all the different substages of the logon process and really be able to baseline how well they're doing, or poor for that matter, they are doing as far as logons. And with this report and any other report, you can filter this by time, you can filter by individual servers, or even applications as well too. And obviously, with all this deep information that we're tracking, what's unbelievable is we're actually able to get, in addition to user performance, such as their experience or their logon times. We're even able to give information about when users are logging in, logging out, and we're the only ones who can tell you how productive each user is within their Citrix session. So, our analytics are so deep, we're able to publish these reports that really help IT collaborate and support the rest of the business so they can see individual users when they log in, when they log off, so how many hours were they logged in for, and uniquely, we can report on how active a user is during their session, identify what applications they're using. So again, this has really helped their IT team support the rest of the business. Obviously with so many working remotely, the question is on everyone's mind, who's working and how productive are they working from home? This report was really able to give IT an objective look at how much people are working and how often they are being productive within their session, which has really helped support the company's work from home strategy. And with this deep, integration with Citrix and these reports and analytics and data, everyone has a slide like this, but the takeaway from this slide is that you don't have to be a large enterprise company such as Bell or Xerox or Viacom to be able to use Goliath software. Our technology is able to scale, obviously, to companies of that size, but we're also have an ease of use price point that we're readily and often used by small, medium-sized business as well. So with that,
Not sure if you cut off, Joe, but I'll jump in here. I think you were just transitioning to the last slide there for Q&A. But that's a really good point, by the way, which is that you don't have to be a large organization or a large enterprise even to get detailed purpose-built analytics that allow you to make objective conclusions. So I think that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So at this point in time, we'll go over a couple of questions. Before we do that, just know that there's a couple of ways where if you'd like to learn a little bit more, in case we don't get to your questions, or you'd like a personalized demonstration, we can always be happy to arrange that for you. You can trial the technology. And we also offer benchmarking as a service. So as a service offering where you can just bring in Goliath, utilizing our technology and team to help you with that benchmarking exercise. And of course, we also offer ongoing remote monitoring management services, where this is, of course, a key part of that process. As far as the questions goes, there were a couple of very good ones that were submitted in actually a pretty short time period. And we'll go through those quickly. I'm going to see if I can't batch a couple of them up, and I'll address a couple of quick ones here. And then I'll turn a couple over to Joe. And Joe, I'll tag you in if you want to answer a few of those as well. I'll feed them off to you. So the first one is, do you support Citrix Cloud? The answer is yes. All of these analytics and data are available both for Citrix Cloud as well as on-premise, more traditional flavors and architectures of Citrix. And then there were a couple of good ones that came in here as well. One of the, I'll batch these two questions up together because they're similar, Joe, and then if you can maybe address them. Two questions. One was, how do you get the actual data? And the related question is, do I need to run scripts to get the data? And if so, how are you able to track it historically then? I think that's a pretty good question, Joe. Did you want to take that one?
Sure, thanks, John. So the answer to that question, I guess I'll address this second.
I don't know, Joe, I think we might be losing your audio there. I know I can't hear you. If that's, so I'm not sure if that's impacting everyone else, but why don't I just jump in here in the interest of moving things along. I'll field the question. Joe, are you there?
Yeah, I think I'm having some issues with my audio. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. I hope everyone else can too. Do you want to take that question?
Sure. I was saying, so the answer to the second question first, do I need to run scripts? The answer is no. Scripts are not required. I know that some other products in the marketplace do require you to run scripts to be able to get some more deep information. Our technology has all the embedded intelligence and automation completely out of the box. So it's going to collect, correlate, and interpret that data for you. If you like to run scripts, we do also support those as well too. As far as how we get the data, I think what might help answer that question is to pull up our deployment architecture to give everyone a view of that. So the way that our technology works is that we integrate both agentlessly and agent-based with Citrix. So we have an API into Citrix, so we're able to get a lot of that deep information through the API, and we also have a lightweight intelligent agent that would be placed on your Citrix servers. That's all going to report back to a central Goliath server. And that Goliath server also has its own database, so that allows us to be able to keep the metrics historically at no extra charge. So there's no extra fee for being able to keep 6 months worth of data or 1 year worth of data. All of that is included with the subscription.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway there is that because of that integration and the APIs and the way we do it uniquely, we actually collect and keep all that data information. So you don't need to action real-time data, run a script, or do anything like that. And as a result, like Joe just said, that data and those details are then kept historically in the database, meaning that you can then do the kind of reporting that Joe was just going over. Reporting and benchmarking, baselining in a detailed way that's tracked historically to give you the right data and the right details so you can actually understand user experience and draw conclusions from it, not just know whether it's good or bad. So great question, the two folks that submitted the parts of that question. Okay, next question. A little bit more specific, but still on the topic of data, Joe. The question is, can I look at an individual session? And if so, how do I know if latency is good or bad?
Good question. Yes, you can look at individual sessions. So within our product, there's actually embedded data interpretation lines, and I think it'd probably be best if I showed that. So if we come back to the example we used before about how we're presenting those user experience data for you. So we roll all of it up into this little summary tab here to be able to give you that high level overview of user experience. And then each of the individual data points, so take example, round trip time, we're able to actually apply data interpretation lines as part of that graph. So give me 1 second here. There we go.
Yeah, and just so everyone on the webinar understands, we're looking at one individual session here. And so to get here, Joe just looked at the sessions in the background, clicked on a user, and got this pop-up that examines an individual session on a detailed basis. And like you were alluding to earlier, and I'll get back to you in a second, Joe, like you were alluding to earlier, these details, which we again get on an individual user basis, are what fuel and give us the details needed to do effective benchmarking and baselining on a global or environmental user level. Joe, you were talking about the lines here on the graph.
Right. So anyone in IT, all levels of IT, whether that's help desk or third line support, is able to quickly find a user session and click into any one of those user experience metrics like we showed you in that one report, and they're able to track and trend that data for the time frame of that session. And they don't need to know exactly what's good performance and what's bad performance, because the embedded intelligence, the technology tells you. So when you click into a graph, you can see these data interpretation lines here that are going to quickly show you whether performance was good or whether performance was poor for that specific data point that you're looking at. So for this example, I'm looking at the performance of the network, and I can see that network latency was consistently under what the caution threshold was for this user. So I can know without a shadow of a doubt that this user's performance was good for this session.
Right. Yeah, and that we're focusing on benchmarking and baselining today. But what our customers have found is that kind of embedded intelligence, knowing what good and bad performance is right on the graph without even having to have Citrix background knowledge, can be a real difference in not only then baselining and benchmarking, but then actually allowing your support organization to do something on a day-to-day basis with that data. And many folks found changed the way the IT support organization is actually able to support Citrix. So, okay, great question, whoever submitted that one. Okay, next question. We have one or two. The next question is, do I have to buy the product to get these reports? And then this is related to the last question, Joe, is they asked about the benchmarking service, which I mentioned on that last slide. So do you have to buy the product to get these reports? And can you explain the benchmarking service quickly?
Sure. No, you don't have to buy the product to be able to get this information. We offer short-term subscriptions for 90 days. That includes a turnkey product installation, so you can benchmark and baseline all those user experience metrics. And you can hire us to provide the product and deliver all these results as a service. So with that service, we would deploy the technology for you, and we would be helping you isolate root cause and assist in putting permanent fix actions in place and being able to provide these benchmarking reports to you.
Right. We won't reject your purchase order if you do decide to buy the software. However, many folks sometimes just like to leverage our technology and our team for a point in time result, which we're happy to meet our customers there and satisfy their requirements, however they'd like to consume and gain access to this kind of data. So, okay, so those are the last of the questions that I have, just making sure we don't have any late questions coming in. Okay, so I just want to go back to that landing final slide, Joe, if we could. I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Like I said earlier, you can, of course, get a personalized demonstration. We'd be happy to do so, trial the software, or reach out to us and ask about benchmarking or our remote monitoring management services. One thing to note as well, at the bottom, you'll see a mention of an article by Citrix CTP, Microsoft MVP, and VMware vExpert Teresa Miller. She wrote a really good piece on this that I thought was pretty insightful around how this kind of detail and specifically scorecards in this way give you the ability to actually and truly benchmark and baseline Citrix user experience. Really good piece. Teresa Miller has a tendency to know a little bit about what she's talking about, having been in the space for over 20 years. So really appreciate her piece there. You can access it in the chat window. It's pasted there if you'd like to access a link to give that a read. It's a 1 or 2 minute read, but really good stuff. So, okay, thank you everyone for joining, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.